We're live.
Greetings from Anekdhara and welcome to the 53rd webinar. I'm very happy to announce that we have two old friends but very distinguished speakers. And we have two distinguished speakers who are my old friends. You will hear about them from the moderator, Mr. Ronak Chandrasekhar, who will anchor this webinar. Ronak Chandrasekhar is a public policy professional with a background in law, a master's in international affairs from the Fletcher School, Tufts University, and has considerable experience working with for and non-profits, think tanks, and universities in India and the US. He's a skilled strategy and project management, regulatory and policy analysis person who writes and organizes too, above all for us at the Anekdhara. He's a fabulous anchor and master of hosting webinars. Over to you, Ronak, please.
Thank you, Madhu sir. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 53rd edition of Anekdhara. And thanks to everyone that's tuning in this Sunday morning. Today, we have an excellent session focusing on Iran and the ongoing conflict in West Asia. To set some context, in late February, Israel launched airstrikes in Tehran that killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, acting on intelligence that was provided by the United States of America as part of a joint operation. The act came amidst what was being characterized by some commentators as already deteriorating negotiations between the US and Iran on a nuclear peace agreement, and was described by the US as a preemptive move against an emerging threat. The aggression by the US and Israel led to what was already a volatile regional conflict to significantly escalate and led Iran to commence its own retaliation. Iran launched its own airstrikes against Israel and US military bases in the Gulf. It launched coordinated airstrikes and drone attacks against critical energy infrastructure in the Gulf. And crucially, it also blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, a key global maritime energy supply choke point through which a huge proportion of global oil, natural gas, petrochemicals, and fertilizers are traded. The nature and scale of Iran's retaliation has surprised a lot of the world, and its ongoing blockade continues to deeply stress global oil, petrochemicals, and fertilizers trade. The natural question, therefore, is how does a seemingly less powerful country manage to do this? Iran's strength and resilience is built on three interconnected pillars. The first is geography, as it is placed in a strategically valuable position where it can control supply chains that originate from the Gulf countries and transit via the Persian Gulf. It is at the crossroads of Central, West, and South Asia and commands a significant stretch of land and a critical waterway. Number two is energy resources. Iran has some of the world's largest proven crude and natural gas resources that are and is energy resources. Iran has some, sorry, yeah, uh, it has some of the world's largest proven crude and natural gas resources that are woven into the fabric of its foreign and economic relations and can be a significant point of leverage in its external relations. And lastly, asymmetric strategies. While Iran and indeed most countries can't compete head to head in conventional military power with the US, it has a robust and layered approach that relies on a network of regional proxies that extend across Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and more. It has a considerable arsenal of ballistic missiles, a strong navy adept at swarm tactics, and a sophisticated cyber and drone program. Together, these allow Iran to project considerable power that relies on economic leverage, vast resources, and being able to counter conventional military tactics and powers. This enables strong resilience for Iran in the ongoing conflict. And we're excited to host two leading experts in Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava and Professor Aftab Kamal Pasha to discuss our topic for today, which is the West Asia crisis, Iran's strategic resilience, and its aftermath. Our first speaker today is Dinkar P. Srivastava, the former Indian ambassador to Iran. He has served extensively in West Asia and on both sides of the Gulf. This has included Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Libya, and Iran. As an ambassador to Iran from 2011 to 2015, he negotiated the Memorandum of Understanding for Indian participation in the Chabahar port development. He also has experience of working in Washington, D.C., in Brussels, and in Jammu and Kashmir, dealing with issues such as human rights, terrorism, Pokhran II, and the Kargil conflict as part of the Ministry of External Affairs. Since retirement, he has served on the board of directors of the Gas Authority of India, as well as the India Ports Global Limited. And also, he has authored two books: Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of the Line of Control, and Pakistan, Ideologies, Strategies, and Interests. We're delighted to have you today with us, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ronak. Thanks for a very generous introduction. Let me begin by saying that what happened on 28th February was not a preemptive strike by Israel and US against Iran, which preemptive strike in the conventional sense means that you are preempting what you anticipate a military strike from the other side. What the Israeli and the Americans attack preempted was a diplomatic solution, which was within reach, as the Oman's foreign minister, who was the mediator, said in a statement in US in an interview to CBS on 27th February, the day before the strike was launched. And Al-Busaidi, the foreign minister, gave details. He said that Iran had agreed to an enrichment level of little over 1%, which was much below 3.75%, which is permitted under NPT and which was permitted under the last nuclear accord called JCPOA under Obama administration. Iran had also agreed to convert its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which had been enriched up to 60%, into fuel through a irreversible process. So, as the foreign minister said, a peace deal was within reach, and this was preempted by the decision of Israel and the US to launch an attack. It was not a war of necessity, it was a war of choice. And the results are there to see. Before the war, the issue was being, claimed to be a nuclear issue. As I just mentioned, this was not really the issue. It was about to be resolved, in fact. After the war, Hormuz has become an issue. Before the war, Hormuz was open. The war was launched not because Iran was about to have a breakout and race towards weaponization, but because the street protests, widespread street protests in Iran in December and January on economic hardships, had convinced Israel and US that Iran is weak and this is the time to launch the attack. Now, the results have been just the reverse. That is, the people have rallied around the government, and Iran showed its resilience, its capacity to prosecute war in the midst of a leadership change. The top leadership had been eliminated in the opening salvo of the war. But despite that, Iran has fought on courageously. This resilience comes from a deep sense of history and a pride in their civilization, which predates advent of Islam. And this is also, if you go to Tehran, there's a cemetery called Bahisht Zahra, that is the paradise of flowers. This is a cemetery of the war dead of the Iran-Iraq war. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Iranians from all walks of life, young Iranians, children who died in the war when Iran had just emerged from revolution, was isolated for international community. So the Iranian resilience and the sense of nationalism was underestimated in launching this war, which has had this major, which is a major miscalculation. If we go back a little, Iran had actually accepted restraint on its nuclear program under JCPOA, which was negotiated under Obama administration in 2015. At that time, I was Indian ambassador to Iran. Iran kept its commitment till President Trump, in his first term, withdrew US from the accord. And even till a year later, Iran did not start enriching beyond the permissible level. So the goalposts have been moved. And it's not simply the words of Oman's foreign minister, Tulsi Gabbard, who was then chief of Defense Intelligence Agency, the top intelligence body in US, who has recently tendered her resignation or has been forced to resign. She said in a congressional testimony sometime after the war started that Iran was not making the bomb. This is, the question was in the context of US strikes the previous summer, which had essentially buried this fissile material under a huge mountain. And the question was if they had restarted the program. Her categorical reply was no. And this was also confirmed by IAEA. So the war was started by Israel and by US, not because of the nuclear issue, but because they thought they could bring about a regime change. And since then, this idea has been dropped by President Trump in his statements, but this was a beginning. Now, Iran has, as a weaker of the two sides, Iran has taken a heavy beating. It has undergone 21,000 bombing raids, 11,000 by US and 10,000 by Israel. But it has emerged as the strategic winner with its control of the Hormuz, which essentially means that in future, even if Hormuz opens now, Iran sits next to it, and it can always, turn on and turn off the tap. And even for doing business with Arab Gulf states, you'll need Iran's say-so, not explicitly. That is not going to be accepted, I think, in this accord or by international community. But yes, that implicit threat will always be there. What is the impact of war? Hormuz accounted for 20% of global oil supply, and it accounted for slightly more, about 25% of global LNG supply. Now, if you see it in the context, this is bigger in terms of supply disruption than the second oil price shock, which also started with the Iran 79 revolution. At that time, about 10% of the global oil supply was removed from the international market because of Iranian revolution. This time, 20% has been removed. There is no alternate source which can compensate for such a big quantity. The East-West pipeline, which Saudi Arabia has running west to Yangon, or a pipeline, smaller pipeline, which UAE has to Fujairah, can barely carry about 5 million barrel and so on. And there's a caveat there, because even though the East-West pipeline of Saudi Arabia can carry 5 million barrel, Yanbu port cannot export more than 2 to 3 million barrel per day. So it's a huge impact on the oil prices, and this is reflected in the sharp escalation. The oil prices went up from around $70 to $72 on the eve of the war to $116 per barrel. This is Brent. The Indian crude oil basket, which stood at $72 per barrel before the war, touched $157 per barrel. And this indeed was the most expensive crude basket. And it remained at that level for more than a month. So you can imagine the impact on the economy. Let me just mention that $1 increase in the price of crude oil, if it is sustained over a year's time, will add about 15,000 crores, roughly $2 billion to India's annual oil import bill. I hope that this price escalation is not sustained, but the prices will not come down even after the war ends. It will not come down quickly for the reason being that even if Hormuz is open, the oil production facilities have been damaged on both sides of the Gulf. Uh, Iran has restricted flow through the Hormuz, and as a counter, US has imposed a blockade of Iranian ports. The calculation is that if the blockade continues after a point, because Iran will be forced to shut its oil wells because there's not enough storage supply. And once you shut off the oil wells, there's a permanent damage to geological structures. And even if you restart, it will be suboptimal solution. Now, what we have to bear in mind that it's not simply Iran which is going to suffer. It's also the same logic applies to Arab Gulf countries on the other side of the Gulf. And in fact, their production has remained, or their exports have remained closed for a much longer time. So what we are looking at that even after Hormuz is open, because of damage to these production facilities, and in case of LNG, Qatar says that 17% of its LNG plant is damaged. It will take 3 to 5 years. So the prices will remain high, and the effect is not simply on oil or LNG, but also urea. India is an agricultural country, and urea is important to us. Urea prices went up from $380 per barrel before the war to $950, roughly 2.5 times or 3 times the pre-war period. LPG prices went up from $480 to today's price is around $1,100, again, roughly 2.5 times. Sulfur has gone from $400 per ton to $950 per ton. So this is going to have a major impact on our economy. Our economy is still doing relatively better than those of many other countries. What is the impact on the regional countries? And as I mentioned, the Gulf Arab countries lost their crude oil exports. They have lost now for about more than 2 months. A daily loss accounts to roughly $1 billion. So you are looking at about $70 billion simply in terms of oil. And there will be additional losses in terms of LNG and petrochemicals. Now, this has also affected US. The gas price, the petrol prices at the pump have gone beyond $4 per gallon, which used to be the comfort level. And the theory goes that if it exceeds this, the party in power loses the elections, and congressional elections are coming up in November. The price at the pump is around $450 per gallon, above the $4 threshold. Now, what is a way forward? I think I'm speaking on the basis of whatever has come out about the framework agreement under discussion. The exact details are not known, and both sides are giving their own version. But it's supposed to be a two-stage process. The first stage will lead to reopening of Hormuz by Iran and lifting of American blockade against Iranian ports by US. This is a welcome. If it goes through, this will be a very welcome development. It will happen gradually over a period of month or so. It will provide relief to international community. It will also provide relief to countries of the region, including Arab countries and Iran. The second stage will be discussions on the nuclear issue. And this is where it is stuck. And President Trump's statements on and off mention that, Iran cannot have nuclear weapon. And of course, Iran itself has committed to that. And I have already mentioned they were willing to accept a lower level of enrichment and blend down the highly enriched uranium to fuel. Now, this should not be, that is the second stage, should not be allowed to hold hostage opening of the Hormuz, which is required immediately to bring down prices. And US, by lifting the blockade against Iran, does not completely lose, will not be without without leverage over Iran, because the US sanctions still remain, which are linked to the nuclear issue. So it should be possible to show flexibility, but then there are other considerations. President Trump has made it a prestige point that, he is a better negotiator than his predecessor, President Obama. And this has to be a better deal, which means a harsher deal. So now it has to be remembered, US has not won this war. And it has also been to be remembered by hardliners on the other side. And this is what Kalibaf, the Speaker of Iranian Parliament, said in a public statement, that though we have not been defeated, please remember we have not won the war. So this moderation is important. And the deal should not be overly burdened by bringing in other issues like regional issues, what is called proxy. These are things which can be discussed separately. And this is my personal view. In a conference where all the regional countries, including Israel, should participate for non-aggression pact, a kind of West Asian Helsinki Accord. Now, what are the long-term consequences of this war? Prolonged no war, no peace situation, which is what is going on today, at some stage is going to tip the global economy into recession. All the economies have taken a hit, and even the consumers in the rich world, and this is, I'm quoting Financial Times, that in US and UK have taken a hit because the inflation has risen faster than increase in salary. So economic slowdown, which is already there, it may lead to economic recession. Second is erosion of US influence in West Asia. And this is already in train. Just a month before this war started, President Trump had announced that US will withdraw from Iraq by September of this year. Now, in this war, before the war erupted, 9 Arab states had written to President Trump advising against the war, and their advice was not heeded. So there must be a natural question that they cannot decide the policy of their senior partner, and the alliance has only brought them Iranian retaliation. The basing system, the American bases, there were 13 bases, has not really helped, because these bases were attacked by Iran and are supposed to have been completely destroyed. So if the bases cannot protect the Arab countries, what is the point in having them if they only bring Iranian retaliation from an embittered Iran? And Iran is deeply embittered. It lost the senior leadership. There were a huge number of casualties and so on. This has also had a direct impact on our region. That is, Pakistan has got a high profile as a mediator, but we have to bear in mind the distinction between high profile and influence. Pakistan is essentially US's messenger boy. Iranians know it, but they are in a tight situation. The country which really wields power is China, because China is the largest and the sole buyer of Iranian crude oil. And this is why this issue, that is Chinese doing more to help opening of Hormuz, was top on the agenda of President Trump during his meeting with President Xi, though President Trump initially denied it. But the readout from the White House clearly mentions that this was something which the American side emphasized. And so far, the Chinese side, whatever the private conversation, has not said much in public. So the fate of Hormuz Strait got linked to the fate of another strait on the other side of the globe, that is Taiwan Strait. China will probably try to extract a quid pro quo from US. Now, this is going to be the third major political consequence, that is a weakened US, weakened in the immediate run in terms of depleted ammunition to counter China, and in the long run, if US has, which was a major hegemon in the Middle East since the Second World War, oil for security deal, which President Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz agreed. If US has to depend on China to pull its chestnuts out of fire in Middle East, then obviously it's an indication of waning of its influence. Now, Pakistan has, as I said, they have got a profile and they have benefited. They have got a new bank account. And this is evident from the fact that, the Saudis quickly stepped in after UAE withdrew $3 billion from Pakistan. Saudi Arabia has given 3 plus 5, $8 billion to Pakistan. And there are also reports that Pakistani troops and aircrafts have arrived in a Saudi base on the eastern seaboard. This is in pursuance of the mutual defense agreement which they had signed last year. But, it's very clear against whom this mutual defense agreement is aimed, because the Pakistani troops and the aircrafts are stationed in the east facing Iran. So this is a strange situation where Pakistan tries to play the honest broker, and at the same time it is aligned with Saudi Arabia. China certainly has emerged as the major as a country which has gained. Now, let me conclude by touching on the bilateral aspect, which I dealt with, and I somehow feel it's not sufficiently understood in public discourse in India. And this is, one very important factor. If you look at the map, Iran is your neighbor's neighbor. You can have territorial dispute with your neighbor, as we have. You can't have a problem with your neighbor's neighbor. And in fact, the neighbor's neighbor, Iran in this case, has the same problem with Pakistan, which we have. During my last 2 years, I served in Iran for 4 years. Last 2 years, there were 14 major terror attacks on Iran in Sistan, Balochistan province by groups based in Pakistan. In 2019, you would remember there was this terror attack in Kashmir. What was very famous? A lot of our security forces, was it not Pahalgam, this was at Pulwama. A day before Pulwama, there was an identical strike in Sistan, Balochistan province of Iran, in which I think, if I remember the number, 24 Iranian security force people were killed they were traveling in a bus, and the bus was ran by a jihadi in a car laden with explosives. So, in one case there, I remember, and there were killings of Shia. In one case, the Iranian reaction was so strong that Iranian parliament passed a unanimous resolution against Pakistan. And Iran has also circulated a letter to United Nations as a UN document against the terror attacks on Iran from Pakistani soil. So we have common issues, and we have worked together in Afghanistan in the past. I negotiated Chabahar MOU, and one of the reasons why, it's not simply the port, it symbolized a convergence of interests. We have other issues, but I think I will, yes, one civilizational link, let me just mention very quickly, historical link. We know the influence of Persian on Urdu language. I come from Lucknow. which is where Urdu language really developed, evolved. In my first meeting with Iran's then Foreign Minister Salehi, a very distinguished man who headed Iran's nuclear program for 10 years and did his PhD in nuclear physics from MIT, Mr. Foreign Minister Salehi said, Ambassador, the root of Persian is Sanskrit. I initially thought he was trying to humor me, but later I checked and he was right. So we have very strong links, both historical links and a convergence of interests. And this is something we have to bear in mind while deciding our policy in this West Asian crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Srivastava. That was an incredible assessment of how we came to this point and its aftermath. I particularly liked how you countered that US narrative of this idea of a preemptive strike, whereas it was actually a preemption of diplomatic solutions and a war of choice. Based on your assessment, perhaps you could also call it a war of hubris on the part of Donald Trump. But yeah, also it's great that you ended with the bit about our historical ties and civilizational ties with Iran, because I think that really sets the stage up for Professor Pasha and his contributions to this discussion. I know Professor Pasha's one of his aims is to educate people about the historical and cultural links that India has with the people of West Asia and North Africa, and to increase our understanding of our policy with them. Um, Professor Pasha is an ex-associate dean, director, and chairman of Gulf Studies at the School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He has also held academic postings in Egypt at the Cairo University and in the US at St. Cloud University in Minnesota. He's been a visiting professor in over a dozen Indian universities and has organized over 50 national and international seminars and conferences, and has also participated in dozens of seminars and international conferences in over 50 countries representing India. He has authored many books and is a widely cited academic scholar on issues related to West Asia, North Africa, and India's foreign policy. Professor Pasha, we're delighted to have you with us today. The floor is yours, sir. Sir, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Ronak Chandrasekhar, for your kind words to introduce me. It's a pleasure to be associated with your webinar. You see, the title of today's webinar, it has three parts. That is the West Asia crisis, then the Iranian strategic resilience, and the implications. Let me dwell briefly on these three issues and then touch on bilateral relations between India and Iran. You see, the West Asia crisis, without going into the background, the current one started the Hamas attack on Israel in October 2023. And Israel's reaction, what the UN has called as genocide in Gaza, where more than 30,000, 70,000 Palestinian men, women, children, elderly have been killed, and which continues despite ceasefire. Then the Lebanese front was opened by Hezbollah, the reaction, and that still continues despite ceasefire, and both keep attacking each other. But in addition to these two, the Israelis also had to deal with the Houthi threat, Red Sea from Yemen. And not only the Israelis bombed and killed the entire cabinet, including the Prime Minister, but also the United States got involved and some NATO countries also. But without much success, they had to eventually leave the Red Sea with losses. Then the Israelis also bombed and occupied quite a large part of Syria and the Golan Heights and neighboring areas, degrading Syrian military. And not only before or when Bashar al-Assad was in power, but also when Shara came to power. Then we saw the attack last year on Iran, And of course, just before that, an attack on Qatar also, the US ally, where this central command of the US is located. So you have the Israelis making use of the October 2023 events to prepare the ground for eventual collaboration with the United States to launch their attack on 20th February. And the idea was that using this Hamas attack, they would grab the Gaza Strip in the Greater Israel project, and also force the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah and fulfill their territorial ambitions, that is south of Litani River in Lebanon. And of course, during the confusion transition from Bashar al-Assad to Shara, they grabbed territories belonging to Syria in addition to the Golan Heights, which they continue to occupy since 1967. They also bombed some parts of Iraq, and of course, when the peace negotiations were going on between Hamas, the US, through Qatari mediation, they tried to kill the Hamas leadership, but they failed. So the West Asia crisis was already going on from one of Palestinian issue located on Palestinian issue to a regional war where Iran's axis of resistance was confronted and Israel tried to weaken. Although all this with the support and backing of the United States and perhaps some European countries, NATO allies. So the regional situation was already in a huge crisis, and they believed, both the United States and Israel believed. More so, Netanyahu perhaps was able to convince Trump in his new second administration that Israel has successfully tackled not only the Palestinian issue, but also weakened substantially Iran's proxies or the axis of resistance which Iran and its supporters involved. So when President Trump came for the second time last year January, so this talk has been going on, and finally in June, both of them attacked the nuclear facilities of Iran. And Trump claimed that they have obliterated the 3 nuclear plants at Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow. But Iran continued to prevent the IAEA from inspecting and finding out exactly what happened in those attacks. But the world believed that Iran's program was largely underground and that it has survived despite the on-site destruction of the nuclear facilities, which Iranians themselves confirmed to the outside world. So the West Asia crisis was in the making, and both the United States and Israel, the Mossad was able to bring to the attention of the Israeli Prime Minister, and the Israeli Prime Minister in turn was there in Washington, situations of trying to impress President Trump that they are working hard and the regime is weak because of the continued economic sanctions and killing of the nuclear scientists and military civilian leadership last year, and in the course of several attacks which they have carried out. So the idea was that in a quick shock and awe bombing, they will be able to kill the top political, civil, military leadership, which they did achieve on 28th of February, and believe that people will come out like they did in December, January on the streets. because of various issues. But unfortunately, the Iranians turned against the invaders and attackers, and they supported the regime. And this is because of the nationalist feelings which any people under attack for such a long period of suffering, pain, and destruction, which they have witnessed since 79, because both the countries have been working in one way or the other for regime change uh, since 1979. Carter tried it, he failed. Reagan also tried, and the Iran-Iraq war also failed. So the several attempts by both the countries and Netanyahu's one-point agenda since 1995, clean break, has been not only to degrade the other Arab countries, so-called radical Arab countries, but also Iran and its nuclear program, which has been harping as a danger to Israel's security or its larger hegemony in the region. So they believe that it is a matter of time that they will be able to overthrow this Ayatollah's regime. And like Venezuela, they will be able to control Iranian oil, as President Trump and many of his administrative officials believe that nearly 30% of the world's oil will be under American control. But what they got instead was massive Iranian retaliation, not only on 28th and subsequently practically every day on Israel, massively destroying their military targets, but also on US bases in all the GCC countries, perhaps lesser to the Sultanate of Oman, but more so on UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and also Iraq, where the popular mobilization forces also were mobilized by the Iranians. And at the same time, the Hezbollah also launched its attack on Israel. So on many occasions, Israel and Hezbollah were coordinating their attack, remarkably well planned, on Israel's strategic assets throughout the country, from the Mona Bay nuclear facilities to the northern part, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, and military airports, so on and so forth. And Israel suffered heavy losses, both men and material. Due to its censorship, military censorship, the world has not seen, but reports are coming out of its huge loss. This, however, the Iranians also suffered heavy losses to their infrastructure, energy sector, their universities, the schools, the famous girls' school, where more than 150 children were massacred in the initial days of the war. But the Iranian response has been robust. Their cheap drones, their short range, medium range, and long range missiles were able to inflict such damage, which astonished even President Trump, that he never expected or he was never told by his military or advisors that Iran would be in a position to decimate the US bases in the Gulf region. So that was a massive loss to the United States, and perhaps that may reverse its long-term presence in the region, given the pathetic situation where the Gulf states expected the United States to robustly defend them. Instead, some air defense material was shifted to Israel when it was perceived as weak or vulnerable. So the strategic resilience of Iran, there are three things. One is during the Iran-Iraq war, the Ayatollahs and the leadership IRGC realized that they must have a long-term defense plan. And it is in the aftermath of this Iran-Iraq war that they decided that there's no point in having a strong air force, which of course they were not in a position to get planes from anywhere in the world because of the sanctions and hostility. And that they should go for missiles, drones, and cheaper military capability, and also to hide them in their huge geographic bases, mountains which they have, Zagros, Elbrus, and others. So all of these things were decided well in advance, and they systematically worked despite crippling sanctions. They were able to build up a huge military capability, missiles with their engineers, large skilled manpower which they have got. I must also add here that I've been to Iran many times and visited most of the universities and interacted with top people. And I found them some of the finest brains in the world, having studied in America, Brazil, Russia, China, Australia, wherever they could get. So they have invested huge resources in human resources development. And it's not only in defense, but reverse engineering also. And in any other science and technology field, mathematics and others, they have brilliant people. And the women have been the backbone of Iran's resilience. They have been able to contribute much more than what the outside world knew about what was going on in the Iranian capability. So they have a society which is scientifically oriented despite the Islamic orientation of the regime. And the commitment of the people, along with the ideological moorings of the regime, have given Iran this strategic resilience, not only in the military capability, but also in the cutting edge technology in almost all fields, science, technology, medicine, so on and so forth, even in the academics, in the case of publications, books, etc. They shine and they are the top of the ladder. So in that way, the resources the regime, Iranian government was able to mobilize, they have been flowed back into the development of education, medicine, science, technology, defense, so on and so forth. And that was because of their principle of self-reliance. And I don't think they got much help in the defense field from either Russia or China. Perhaps from Pakistan or North Korea, they might have got, or some other countries. But I largely feel credit to their defense development to their own contribution by their engineers and skilled people. They have a huge pool of talent available in the country. So the world was focused and believed that sanctions would cripple and weaken its economy, and it may not have the capability. But it showed its resilience not only in the nuclear issue, uh, but also now we are realizing the missile, drone, and other military capabilities. So in that way, the credit goes not only to the leadership, but also to the people who have endured sanctions, who have sacrificed despite the suffering, decade-long suffering. They have been able to build up a strong economic base. If one goes to Iran, to different parts of the country, you would hardly be surprised, except the dollar rate there, local compared to the local currency, which is very high. But otherwise, you see, you are walking into a developed country with excellent infrastructure, public transport, so on and so forth, on par with other developed countries. So in that way, they developed their capability, and unlike the Gulf countries, which wasted their resources on buying phony weapons which they could not use, or in investing the petrodollars in America, London, and Europe, so on and so forth, without developing a strong capability and believing that the Americans would defend them indefinitely from any attack. But the Iranians made sure that they would stand on their feet, and they knew that American hostility would continue, and Israel would continue to undermine the regime. So they anticipated this US-Israeli attack not only last year but also this February, and they had prepared their strategic plans, their defense plans, and the coordination between the IRGC and the political leadership and the Ayatollahs has been superb. I think that is one of the crucial things which has come out, the coordination between the two. And also its support to the allies, whether it is in Iraq or Syria or in Lebanon or in Yemen and beyond. This has really given its reach beyond the Iranian borders to the entire region. So Iran has been able to push back the US-Israeli attack and crippling sanctions, with pain being inflicted not only by the Iranian military capability, and now reinforced through the Strait of Hormuz issue, but also through their allies, because the allies in Iraq have been able to challenge the American presence there, and also the periodic attacks on Qatar, Kuwait, Qatar, or even in Saudi Arabia. And the Houthis also have been able to harass the UAE, Saudis, and others for the last couple of years. And Hezbollah, of course, has been keeping the Israelis busy on the northern front. And Bashar al-Assad, of course, was of a great asset in the corridor right from Tehran to Beirut. So this is so much about the resilience, and the Gulf states also underestimated the Iranian capability built over a period of time, and they overestimated the US commitment to defend them, which has now exposed and made them much more vulnerable. I must also add here that the diplomatic part of the Iranian strategy has been not just to rely on the military capability, but also to supplement with diplomatic efforts, as was visible during the JCPOA and since last year, with the assistance of Oman and now with Pakistan. They have been engaging almost on a daily basis on how to maximize their achievements through negotiation, through diplomacy, through dialogue, with a bit of persuasion perhaps from Russia and China also, because both these countries not only help Iran, but they also nudge the leadership to be more positive for diplomacy, for negotiations. So it has been a coordinated effort, but basically Iran's outreach on the diplomatic front has been commendable, and they have been able to achieve some successes in this regard, because it has frustrated the Western negotiators about the strategy, about the policies, and how they negotiate with a superpower like the United States concerning the nuclear program and other strategic aims. Now, to come to the aftermath, there is absolutely no doubt. I agree with Ambassador Srivastava that Russia and China have been beneficiaries from this. And I believe that the Gaza event of 2023 really pushed the world towards a more serious approach towards the multipolar world. The US hegemony domination in the Gulf, I think, was at its peak. Now there will be a gradual decline, just as the British-French influence declined after the Suez War in 1956. So this Gulf, this U.S.-Israeli attack is a turning point, not only about U.S. Military power, but also its influence in the region. And I think gradually we will see a decline in the U.S. Commitment or its sought after influence in the region, because Saudi Arabia being the kingpin along with Israel, Israel continues to be the closest ally, but Saudi Arabia is looking for opportunities beyond its relationship with Washington. It is not toying with the idea of a no-war pact with Iran and trying to persuade other GCC members, although with little success with the United Arab Emirates. This is one approach. The second one is the Omani approach. Oman, from the very beginning, even before the revolution, I was going through the archival material. In 1975, they had proposed a Gulf security in which they urged the Gulf countries to include Iran and Iraq in this security architecture. And they have repeated this ad nauseum every year. And they try to persuade other Gulf members that we cannot change our neighbors. And even after the revolution and the formation of the GCC, they kept nudging, persuading their Gulf neighbors to accept Iran as a neighbor and try to work out deals, a peaceful arrangement so that they can live harmoniously and avoid excessive commitments or dependency on the United States. Although Oman itself has bases, US bases in Masira and other places. But they have been very cautious. That is how they were able to escape these Iranian attacks on them. Whereas the Qataris, after 1995, established the Central Command, the Prince Sultan base in Saudi Arabia, the UAE in many places, and Kuwait, of course, after the expulsion of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, became client state virtually of the United States. And Bahrain, of course, has been the headquarters for the US 5th Fleet. So all of this is now a big question mark, whether these countries will go back to the pre-28 security arrangement or they will pay now to rebuild the American bases for the time being. So in that way, the scenario has completely changed, and the Gulf states are realizing that there is a point in what Iran says that the US should withdraw completely from this region, although it may not be achieved. But to a certain extent, they will be cautious in cozying up with the United States. In this situation, the Israeli factor is extremely important in my view, because it is primarily because of the equation between Trump and Netanyahu that this attack last year and this year in February was made possible. The single-minded commitment of Netanyahu against Iran still continues, has been the cardinal principle for this escalation of the Palestine issue to the regional war situation involving many countries and becoming from a regional problem to a global problem, because now not a single country is not affected, whether it is oil, gas from Australia to Philippines, Thailand, Africa, West Europe. Every country has been affected because of the war on Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The peace memorandum of understanding will be achieved one day or the other. I don't want to go into the details about reparations or freezing of the assets. All this will be achieved sooner than later because the American president seems to be determined to have a peace deal either way. And in some cases, he may overlook Netanyahu's pressure or demands. But I don't see a situation where war would escalate into a major conflagration unless something strategic happens in the United States or between US and Israel. I don't foresee a situation where there will be a large-scale invasion or war like 28th February, which we have witnessed. So local skirmishes might continue between the UAE and Iran, or between the US and Iran on the Strait of Hormuz, or how and when Iran will ease its blockade of the Hormuz Strait, and which ships will be allowed to pass through, or which ships will have to pay the toll, so on and so forth. These are details, but the bottom line is Iran would continue to exercise directly or indirectly its control of the Strait of Hormuz, even after the lifting of American blockade, or allowing of the ships by Iran, or removing the minefields in the Strait of Hormuz. A word about Indo-Iranian relations. I remain optimistic that Iran is of strategic importance to India, and the policy of this government is, at best not very friendly. I must say that because 2 days before the attack, Prime Minister was in Israel, and he loved to call Israel as fatherland. And Sanjay Baru and others now say that he was told that there is going to be an attack on Iran, and attack on the leadership, so on and so forth. We refuse to condemn the US-Israeli attack on Iran, number one. Number two, the killing of the political leadership, including Ali Khamenei, was not condoned officially like other countries. Thirdly, the Iranian ship was sunk near our coastal line, and we could have done much more. And we have not condemned the killing of the children and huge civilians in this war, although we took issue on UAE and other places. So you see, this BJP government seems to believe that this theocratic regime, if it goes, or if there is regime change, it will be to our advantage in containing terrorism or Islamic extremism, like Netanyahu believes. He seems to have convinced our government that it is in the interest of India to have this regime out of the country, remove it, to give a death blow. But Iran has shown its friendly nature throughout, unmistakably, by offering us oil and other facilities, and continue to express its solidarity support to the Indian government. Of course, there were frictions, and there will continue to be frictions on many issues, whether it is Kashmir or Indian Muslims, or bilateral issues or BRICS and so on and so forth. But I think it is in our interest to have close strategic relations, because Iran has the largest, third largest oil reserves, second largest gas reserves, and it is the nearest to our territory, to Gujarat, for example, whether it is laying a pipeline or through Pakistan, if things stabilize there, or through Oman. Our energy dependency has been increasing day by day, not in decreasing. So in that way, Iran would remain an important supplier of energy, and relying on expensive American oil and gas, as Ambassador pointed out, the basket of Indian imports has increased to more than $100 or $150, which is a drain on our limited foreign exchange. We need the foreign exchange for our other developmental purposes. So if we burn our foreign exchange sent through hard work and exports by our people just on oil and gas, that will be quite a drain leaving little for other developmental purposes because education, defense, and transport and other things are important from our development perspective to feed and create jobs for millions of people here. So, in that way, I believe that we should correct the aberration in Indo-Iranian relation and not rely too much on Israeli advice or the United States in this matter, because I believe the US is a declining power. If you see the indicators, there's not much. It may remain the sole superpower for some time, but unmistakably China has emerged, and we need to be on the side of the BRICS, whether it is China or Russia or South Africa, Brazil, and other countries which are part of the BRICS, and not side with the power which is on the decline. So, in that way, I feel that this West Asia crisis and the attack on Iran have propelled the world to move energetically, robustly towards a multipolar world, in which we would also find a place, because we have been urging for this multipolar world for a long time and calling for UN reforms and a recognition for our own growing role, not only in the region but also globally. So, in that way, BRICS would be an excellent platform, and lack of condemnation by BRICS of this US-Israeli attack on a member state of Iran, BRICS, I think it is quite troublesome, and we need to correct this deviation sooner than later. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Pasha. That was incredible, and particularly both you and Ambassador Srivastava, as people who spend time in Iran, it's particularly helpful to sort of demystify what the country is like and how it operates for a lot of people who perhaps are ignorant or are subject to, you know, conflicting narratives about the country. Now, as a person interested in this issue and a student of international affairs, I have so many questions, but I'm going to try and be a more selfless moderator and go to audience questions first because we have several that many viewers are raising. We have two questions that I see are interrelated by KVS Rao and Krish Desai. And I was wondering if I could ask Ambassador Srivastava these two questions first. KVS Rao asks, why is it that India thinks it's beneficial to remain neutral in this particular conflict? And Krish Desai has a related question where he's asking what the scope is for India to play a more dynamic role, considering our interests in the Gulf. Ambassador Srivastava, what would be your take on this on these two questions?
I think these two questions are linked. The first one is why India has taken a neutral position, and the second one is why not a more dynamic role. So they're essentially the same questions.
Precisely.
Now, I agree. In fact, this is my question also, that why do we have to be so neutral? And neutrality does not help in politics. And incidentally, non-alignment was never neutrality. It was, as my professor Shishir Gupta put it very well, it was a disguised form of alignment with Soviet Union in those days. Now, in the current context, and this is the reason why I touched upon why Iran is important, that you have to bear in mind those factors. The geography, which you cannot change. It's hugely important to us that they are our neighbor's neighbor, and we have a common problem, which may be hidden from the public gaze because Iran has a bigger problem on its western front. But this is something important to bear in mind. And I think we need to have a rethink about India's position and a more assertive policy should do.
Thank you, Ambassador Srivastava. Professor Pasha, would you have anything to add to that?
Well, I agree with Ambassador Srivastava, but you see, the constraints of the present government in the field of foreign policy and lack of a robust policy on Iran is because of its domestic policy. Because somehow I see the roots of this government's foreign policy are embedded the Hindutva and RSS agenda on minorities and various other issues on neighbor, etc. You see, somehow this has got entangled with Zionism and Islamic extremism, as they call. And, Iran has never attacked uh, any of its neighbors. It has not supported Islamic extremism like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and others have done. So, and on the 9/11 and Al Qaeda, Iran has been cooperative with the West largely, even on Taliban. So, to buy the Israeli narrative on the violence, terrorism originating from this region, from religion, I think that would be wrong for us because it is putting our foreign policy in the dock. And we need to look at it afresh. How we can disentangle this. We may continue to support Israel. There's no problem. As the foreign minister said, it is a technological power. We benefit from Israel, weapons, technology, so on and so forth. But to identify ideologically and paint Iran also in that color and look Iran as a sponsor of terrorism or Islamic extremism, that would be, I think, not in our interest. So we need to correct this aberration as soon as possible.
Sir, if I could probe that a little further, sir. So, can you contextualize how you see our deepening relations with Israel, and how does that compare with? I think both of you alluded to our long-standing relations with Iran. How would you compare that with our long-standing relations with Iran, and where we must go in the future with respect to these two competing powers?
If I can say first, would you allow me?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Yeah. You see, it is not in our interest to see strengthening of ties between Iran and Pakistan or Iran or any other country. We want Iran to be Iran, just busy with itself and what it wants to achieve because of the sanctions and isolation and all that it has suffered. But if it goes beyond that, we need to speak to China, we need to speak to Russia, and we need, because now what has happened is there is a strategic defense agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And this is slowly emerging as a sort of what they are calling Islamic NATO, including Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, which is not a good thing for our interest in this region. So if the American credibility is weakened or if they lose interest in the Gulf, and if this alliance of Arab, Islamic or Muslim countries emerges, this is not in the long-term interest of our national security. So in that way, we need to keep Iran on our side. And that would be, from strategic perspective, as also energy security. Right. And also our tilt towards the Sunni Arabs on the other side of the Gulf, we need to balance with friendship with Iran. And I believe that in the long run, this North-South corridor would be of immense interest, not only for our interest in Afghanistan and Iran, but also Central Asia and Russia and beyond. So this Chabahar, losing Chabahar is a mind-boggling thing. And we need to retrieve that somehow or the other, because IMEC has been a non-starter, the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, because until this Palestinian issue is resolved, this problem will persist. And even if UAE is enthusiastic, Saudi Arabia is not. Jordan is not a stable country where you can bank on it, or the Gaza issue would die down. So in that way, we need to strategically plan our future. We need a roadmap where our interests are, where we need to focus and continuously work. And that, I think, in that framework, Iran is very important.
Right. Ambassador Srivastava, anything to add with this, and in terms of balancing these relations between Iran, Israel, and other regional players for India?
You know, I'm not sure what has gone into government's decision making. I'm no longer part of the government, but I have stated that there are some fundamentals which you cannot ignore, and that is geography.
Right.
And Iran is much more important to us than many of the Gulf countries. It's closer. It's your neighbor's neighbor. It gives you connectivity to Afghanistan, not only Afghanistan and Central Asia, but also Russia, as Professor Pasha was saying. And we also have to bear in mind, where were the Arab states before the war and where are they moving now? Before the war, there was a period of deter or rapprochement between Saudi Arabia, the largest Gulf state, and Iran, and which was a welcome development. There has been a pause, or there has been some, there were attacks on Arab targets, which I think could and should have been avoided because they were non-belligerents. They had advised President Trump not to attack Iran. But in the aftermath of the war, well, at least the shooting war has stopped. Many of these countries, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have reached out to Iran. So if the Arabs themselves are looking to build their relations with their neighbor whom they can't ignore, we can't ignore that either.
Right. Ambassador Srivastava, speaking of geography, we have a question from our audience. Ayan Ali has asked, he referenced your point about something resembling a Helsinki-like agreement. How likely is that if Israel continues to act on its ambitions for a greater Israel? And if I may add on to that question, what do you think this conflict now poses in terms of the outcomes for what the US and Israel are attempting by way of normalization under the Abraham Accords?
The second part first, there has been no positive response to the latest, offer of or exhortation that some of these countries, including Pakistan, should join Abraham Accord. In fact, the Pakistani defense minister came out very strongly.
Right.
Others have, maintained some kind of ambiguous silence. But will Israel's policies allow it to join a regional Helsinki? There is a long-term Israeli policy which cannot be equated with the policies of the present government. And Israel has a long-term interest for normalization of interest with its Arab neighbors. This is what they were trying to achieve through IMEC and I2U2 initiative. Being a participant along with the Arab neighbors and Iran in a regional conference brings them a recognition, which they want.
Right.
And that, of course, there will be a certain cost because some of these countries will raise this issue of two-state solution and so on. That will come down the road, but at least, a beginning has to be made that there should be no change of borders through use of force. There should be recognition of the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which our Prime Minister also mentioned. And there should be non-interference. And this is something which should be very welcome to Israel, because it also takes care of its problems in Lebanon.
Right.
So, it's a complicated question, complex situation, but a step forward along the lines of a regional conference is long overdue.
Right. Professor Pasha, anything to add to that response?
Yeah, you see, this attack on Iran, I think, looking at the implications on GCC, this has exposed the Gulf rulers. This is the third time in recent times that they have been so badly exposed. One was the Kuwait invasion by Saddam, where they were exposed and they had to go for American support. Second one was during the Arab Spring. They felt vulnerable, and leaders who were being overthrown left and right, from Tunisia to Libya to Egypt, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, riots in Oman and Bahrain and Kuwait and all. So now this is a major event which has exposed the leadership's incompetence. And now even the United States is not able to help them. And they are looking for a rapprochement with Iran based on the Omani model, which was floated long back. So this rapprochement it will only accelerate, in my view. And, you see, the Gulf states want to look the other way as far as Israel is concerned. The Americans are trying to encourage Israel to be a partner in the Gulf security, but except UAE, no other country is enthusiastic. So they want to work out a temporary arrangement with Iran. So, and there is no underestimating of the Iranian capability. The Gulf states now know firsthand how vulnerable they are in this kind of a situation, and therefore don't foresee the situation where America will redouble its efforts to defend them, because American priorities have shifted. So in that way, I feel things have dramatically changed, and it will take time for all the parties to recognize this new reality, to Israel, to the United States, to Gulf states, to Iran, because it is such an unexpected event which has happened. A small regional power, a small regional state trying to ward off a superpower and a regional superpower. I mean, no one expected, neither India nor Russia even, and let alone the Gulf countries.
Right.
Yeah.
I know we're almost approaching time, but there are a couple more questions. And if both our speakers will indulge us, I could ask two quick questions, one to each of them. Professor Pasha, we can start with you. Shantanu asks, what is the significance of China's growing role in supporting Iran, and what's its significance broadly for the world, in your opinion?
You see, China's main interest, there are two interests. One is continued import of energy. It sees as a long-term provider of oil and gas, and that will remain. That insatiable quest for energy security, Iran would be the linchpin. The second one is, it wants to use Iran as a strategic partner for its influence in the region, whether it is Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkey, or Central Asia, or even the Gulf states. It wants to use the geography. They have a railroad connection through Turkmenistan, Ashgabat, Kazakhstan, and so on and so forth. So they want to keep, if Gwadar, due to Baluch problem, is an issue, they want to use Iran as an alternative for their energy, trade, influence, and so on and so forth. So in that way, China has invested its long-term prospects in the 25-year agreement, and they would continue to look as an alternative for the CPEC.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. And for the last question, I mean, taking it from the globe back home to Indian considerations. Ambassador Srivastava, Charanjit Singh has a question asking what's India's likely role in the Chabahar port in the medium and long term, and what's your take on that, sir?
Say it again.
Charanjit Singh has asked, what is India's likely role in the Chabahar port in the medium and long term?
Okay, before I answer that question, let me just touch on one aspect of the previous question.
Absolutely.
And let me just mention that China buys more crude oil from Gulf Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and UAE than Iran. So it's not going to sacrifice that interest. And it has been very careful in keeping its doors open to them. Now, coming back to Chabahar, as of now, I don't think there's an immediate possibility of doing much, but we should certainly keep this option open because it's a dictate of geography which you cannot change. This goes beyond the current situation, and I'm sure that this will change once the current war is over, and especially if once Iran is integrated back in the mainstream. This is my hope. I don't know what will happen, whether sanctions will be lifted.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ambassador Srivastava and Professor Pasha. It's been an incredible session here from both of you, both in terms of current and future considerations, but also crucially how much effort you both put into contextualizing the past and how we got here. So sincerely appreciate your presentation and contributions to our session today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your program. Bye.
Thank you, speakers. And for our participants, our next webinar will be on the last Sunday of June, and we'll be announcing the topic on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you can, Anekdhara, we can go offline.